could not make it in person to join you in the beautiful and proud country of Senegal. We have been suffering in Egypt from an internet outage in the last days, which disrupted a lot, including flight schedules. And as a result, I was not able to come in person. So apologies for that, and I hope we can get an opportunity soon to meet in person and discuss different issues pertaining to Palestinian rights. Thirdly, let me also express my gratitude to the organizing team, who everyone in the organizing team have been extremely patient and have been very, very helpful in figuring out alternative ways of enabling me to join you and share my remarks on diplomatic action and the OIC level, with a focus on the situation in Jerusalem as well as the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories as it presents itself today. So I'm going to focus on 5 points, which once our internet issues in Egypt are solved, I will be happy to share with the organizing committee in a written form that could be maybe looked at by interested members. I'm going to focus on 5 points. The first point is, in fact, a quick review of the situation as it's been unfolding in the last 2 years, almost 2 years, since October 2023. And I believe it's important to look at the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories in its totality, not to segment and separate the situation in Gaza as tragic, as horrifying it is from the situation in the West Bank and Jerusalem. I believe that in all 3 regions, we are facing Palestinians. The Palestinian people is facing a war of attrition, is facing in systematic fashion the threats of settlement, illegal settlement activities, the threat of displacement, and war on a civilian population. They are also facing an extremely dire humanitarian situation, especially in Gaza, but it's as problematic in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. So my first point is, when I look at the political situation now, it's important to keep in mind the totality of the situation that Palestinians are facing in the occupied territories, and not separate Jerusalem from the West Bank and Gaza. Second point is that as of now, we are looking at a diplomatic situation in which Arab and Muslim countries are pushing for diplomatic initiatives, for diplomatic solutions, and the different attempts made by different Arab and Muslim countries, bilaterally, multilaterally, and multilaterally is more important for my presentation at the level of the OIC, have not been responded to positively by the government of Israel, which seems to be following a one-sided policy that is not based on settlement, that is not based on conflict prevention, that is not based on conflict resolution. And therefore, it's important to look at the 2 ends of the pole, of the spectrum. Muslim countries, Arab countries pushing for diplomatic solutions, and on the other side, there is no policy will on the side of the Israeli government to respond positively to attempts coming from different capital cities in the Muslim world. The third and last point in the review of the political situation is that when I look, and I believe you must have addressed these points in the first plenary of today, when I look at the situation within the Palestinian people, it is clear to me that there is a will on the Palestinian side to seek ways and seek new policies to settle the conflict without giving up on basic rights and freedoms, which are recognized not only in international law stipulations, but have been recognized by the world community. The right to self-determination, the right not to face displacement, the right not to face illegal settlement activities, the right not to face violence, be it state-sponsored violence or non-state or indirectly violence that is not sponsored directly by the state but is protected by different agencies on the ground as far as the actions of the Israeli government is concerned, the right not to face violence, the right to live in peace, that Palestinians have signaled once and again their willingness to accept mediation efforts, to accept conflict resolution efforts, and once again, this is not being responded to positive. So I'm trying to make the point that we are lacking, as of now, a peace partner on the Israeli side. The current government in Israel is not interested in peacemaking, and this makes it extremely difficult for any diplomatic actions, bilateral, unilateral, bilateral, multilateral on the side of Arab, Muslim countries, as well as on the side of the Palestinian movements, the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah, the other movements and groups on the ground in the occupied Palestinian territories to push forward peaceful solutions. This is, however, not to say that there are no issues on the Palestinian side to be looked at, especially with regard to national reconciliation, that needs to be spearheaded by the recognized Palestinian Authority under President Mahmoud Abbas and under the supervision of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which continues to be the recognized and legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. The second point is with regard to diplomatic efforts that need to be pushed forward by the OIC. And I believe here are different avenues which are important and need to be looked at, where your efforts, your excellencies are key to promote a peaceful settlement and an out of the current situation in Gaza, in the West Bank, and in Jerusalem. The first diplomatic initiative, and there are signs that this has been in discussion, is to back Muslim countries which are currently trying to mediate a ceasefire, trying to mediate and reach a stop to the ongoing hostilities in Gaza, as well as state-sponsored violence in the West Bank, to back these efforts at the UN level, as well as at the level of other multilateral institutions. And if the backing is coming from the OIC, I believe the weight of all member states is extremely significant and will have an impact. The second avenue for diplomatic efforts at the level of the OIC is a reaffirmation of the position of and the principles of the Arab Peace Initiative, which was endorsed in 2002 in Beirut, the capital city of Lebanon, and continues to be for the Palestinian people, for the Palestinian National Authority, as well as for Arab governments, a binding initiative based on the principle of land for peace, an Israeli withdrawal from all occupied Arab territories in June of 1967. And these territories include East Jerusalem, include the West Bank, and include Gaza on the Palestinian side, as well as other territories in Syria, primarily the Golan Heights. It is important at the OIC level to reaffirm the support of the OIC to the Arab Peace Initiative that continues to be, from a Palestinian point of view, multilaterally and extremely important initiative based on which Arab countries have conditioned their normalization with Israel, with the state of Israel, to a viable path to establish the independent Palestinian state and a viable path for the Palestinian people to enjoy the right to self-determination. Right now, we are facing a political situation in which the principle, geostrategic and political situation in the Middle East, in which the principle of land for peace is being replaced by a promoted principle of peace for peace that has been in action in the last years in different ways, where some countries have normalized relations without paying close attention to the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people. Peace for peace is being propagated by some groups, parties, and different factions within the Israeli government as well. And I believe it's important at this point to affirm that the real principle on the ground, since we're still facing a situation of occupation, a situation of illegal settlement activity, a situation of threats of mass displacement in Gaza and elsewhere, that it is about land for peace, land in exchange for peace and normalization, which would do all of us good, not only Palestinians, but Israelis, as well as all Middle Eastern populations. The third avenue for diplomatic action, which I believe is important and is in accordance, similar to the first two avenues, is in accordance to the stipulations of the international law, is to continue to push right now and with all possible tools for easing the dire humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. The current situation has moved from being dire to being catastrophic according to different independent sources. We continue to face a stop of getting humanitarian aid and needed supplies into Gaza, and the suffering of over 2 million Palestinians, and the situation that's unfolding on the ground in terms of pushing the civilian population across different zones with political objectives that are unclear to many of us. And if anything is becoming clear, it is the threat of mass displacement, immediate support for easing the humanitarian situation and for stopping even the rhetoric on mass displacement, and replacing it by a commitment to the principles of international law, which of course do not foresee any mass displacement, not from East Jerusalem, not illegal settlement activities leading to displacement in the West Bank, and not mass displacement in Gaza. I believe it is important at the diplomatic level that the OIC adopts different resolutions leading to a call on the world community to exert pressure, to ease the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza, and to put it in the totality of the situation of the occupied Palestinian territories by linking easing the humanitarian situation in Gaza to safeguarding Palestinian rights and freedoms in East Jerusalem and safeguarding Palestinian rights and freedom in the West Bank. And the fourth avenue is a commitment by means of which I believe that the OIC member states will be reaching out to the Israeli population, because at the end of the day, I believe it is extremely important for us, for everyone interested in the situation in the Middle East, officials, civil society, academic experts, lay women it is important to clearly differentiate between positions and policies adopted and implemented by the government of Israel and preferences among the population. I am, in a written and in a verbal fashion, have been condemning all forms of violence against the civilian population in Israel. I have condemned the attacks of October 7, 2023, and I've condemned different attempts to different acts of violence against Israeli citizens, against citizens of Jewish religious affiliation worldwide. This is an important and a key initiative that is important to come out of the OIC, and it would only be reiterating former positions taken by the OIC on condemning and not condoning violence against civilians, and not condoning violence regardless of religious, ethnic, national affiliation. This is an initiative that needs to be renewed, a resolution that needs to be renewed, and by means of which you will be addressing the Israeli population away from the government to reassure it that land for peace means normalization, means security, means safety, and means never condoning violence and never being silent on condemning violence against civilians in the region and beyond. The last avenue, which I would like to put forward, and then I will wrap up my presentation, the last avenue is an avenue of multilateral cooperation between the OIC and sister organizations elsewhere in the continents of the global south. Next to the OIC, there are different multilateral organizations. I'm not going to name any of them, but Your Excellencies are, of course, aware of the different multilateral organizations that have been out there since several decades or have recently emerged in Asia, in Africa, and in Latin America. These organizations are extremely important to collaborate with to create in the global south a consensus. Palestinian rights in Jerusalem, in the West Bank, and in Gaza. And once again, I believe that the key point is not to separate any one of them from the other two, to create a universal consensus that what is happening, what we have been seeing in the last years, especially in the last couple of years, does not bring us close to settlement of the conflict, does not bring us close to normalization, does not bring us close to a peaceful set of relations in the Middle East and beyond, and that this needs to be addressed, and that the commitment to peace needs to be promoted in governments, with as well as in movements and forces and civil society actors across the region, but especially within Israel and Palestine. By multilateral collaboration is important within the global south, and I believe the OIC can play a key role in promoting it. And also multilateral collaboration with, of course, the League of Arab States, which historically speaking has been extremely close and collaborative with the OIC. This could also be stretched to multilateral collaboration with similar multilateral organizations, OSCE, the EU in the global north and elsewhere, where an opportunity to create consensus that Palestinian rights are no longer to be ignored, are no longer to be put on hold, are no longer to be pushed out of the focus of geostrategic interests and political interests of different states in the Middle East and North Africa and beyond. This could be also extremely helpful. And once again, the OIC with its different member states with their different sets of diplomatic relations can help in this regard. Let me now wrap up
Mr.
by
Hamzawi,
saying that,
please, if you could wrap up. Thank you.
one minute to wrap up. Once again, it's important to remember that the situation that has been unfolding in Jerusalem, in the West Bank, and in Gaza is a situation that is representing an existential set of threats to the Palestinian people, and that needs to be addressed at the multilateral level with different tools that can be and need to be promoted by the OIC at the diplomatic level and with the different diplomatic tools at the disposal of the OIC. Let me stop here and thank Your Excellencies so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Hamzawi, for your very comprehensive presentation with a particular focus on the action that can be taken by the OIC and its member states. We shall continue with our next speaker, Mr. Saidi Gassama, who will brief us on the topic ongoing actions in West Africa. Mr. Gassama is director at Amnesty International Senegal. He has been involved in small arms control work for many years with Amnesty International and RANSA, the International Action Network on Small Arms. He is also the chair of the Senegalese Coalition of Human Rights Defenders and a writer, having published a novel and several short stories. Mr. Gassama, you have the floor.
Numbers on the human rights side and civil society organizations could each have done their presentation, but I have the privilege of giving this presentation, and so I'm going to read the text that I've prepared. Although the situation in Gaza is the main concern of public opinion in West Africa, and it has been since the beginning of the genocidal campaign by Israel on the 27th of October 2023, the situation across the entirety of the occupied territories, including West Bank and East Jerusalem, is the concern of civil society. And when I talk about civil society, I'm talking about it in the broad sense, because I include in that religious organizations and the religious authorities of countries, which are particularly influential here in Senegal. Various types of actions have been taken. That includes information and awareness raising activities. The conflict, of course, dates from 1948, but there is nevertheless still a need to explain to the citizens of the world what this conflict is really about. So over the last 10 years, we know that it strengthened its influence, and it took advantage of the security deficit that many of the states in the sub-region face as a result of clashes with powerful armed groups in many of the countries in the sub-region. We have insecurity linked to those armed groups, but they're also due to internal clashes. And because of those security concerns, many states have bolstered, or rather the position of Israel has been strengthened within those states, and its influence has been strengthened. That influence has been eroded over the last few years, when, of course, human rights organizations in particular documented and exposed the policies of apartheid being practiced by Israel against the Palestinians, including its own Palestinian population. So, exposing those apartheid policies has contributed to a reduction in Israel's influence on the African continent. There was a Pan-African Anti-Apartheid Conference that was held in Dakar from the 10th to the 12th of March 2022, and I greet my colleagues who were behind that Pan-African Anti-Apartheid Conference. Julie Mandela, the child of the icon Nelson Mandela, participated as a parliamentarian in the country, as well as Julius Nyerere, the first president and liberator of Tanzania. Those two figures participated in this Pan-African Anti-Apartheid Conference in Dakar, and that conference was a starting point for the campaign that was successfully carried out and which led to the expulsion of Israeli delegates from the African Union summit, and then subsequently to the suspension of the observer status that Israel had managed to achieve in the African Union in 2021. So that was a successful campaign waged by civil society, which had significant repercussions in the majority of states in the African Union, and which allowed Israel to have its observer status that it acquired in 2021 to be taken away. And that was a status that did give it a great deal of influence within this crucial body on the African continent. Also, in all of the states in the sub-region, and in particular here in Senegal, as is the case in Europe, there have been significant protests bringing together hundreds, sometimes thousands of people to denounce the genocide that is underway and still continues today, unfortunately, in Gaza. There were many such protests in Senegal. There have been at least 3 major protests in Dakar, and they also took place in the various different regions of the country. The most recent one took place in Bour in Dakar, which was very successful. There were women who were symbolically carrying babies to illustrate the fate set aside for the population of Gaza. This protest work is also related to the boycott. Israel is also, after all, a trading partner for many African countries, or through major international brands that are present in our states. Israeli products were being sold in our states. Here in Senegal, when an Israeli product was discovered in a supermarket in Dakar, of course, there were significant protests outside that supermarket. And there was one man in particular who identified that product who was here, and there was a protest, and then that product was removed. There were also calls for a boycott for a type of lamb. You know that Israel promotes intercultural, interreligious dialogue, and a symbolic gesture that it engages in is the distribution of certain types of lamb for less well-off populations. There was a call for a boycott of that, and that was supported by members of the Imams Association of Senegal, and it did find some traction, but unfortunately there were some people who nevertheless did receive that aid that was provided. We need to redouble our efforts to make sure that that boycott is effective, so that the Association of Imams can get rid really of these, we could call them blood lamb, blood sheep that Israel is using to whitewash its image. Then there is advocacy activities also, which, as I said, allowed for the suspension of Israel's observer status at the African Union, and also advocacy actions in a country such as Senegal. Advocacy is very easy to do because you're talking to authorities who, since the country's independence, have supported the Palestinian cause. And in this very hotel, on the eve of the OIC summit in 2024, an Amnesty delegation was met by the president here in this hotel, and we discussed the question of Gaza, the question of Palestine. And at that meeting, he reaffirmed that under his government, the state of Senegal would do even more to support Palestine. And the following day, that was seen in the historic statement by the president at the OIC summit in Banjul, where he clearly, in unambiguous terms, called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, and above all, for the two-state solution in the region, of two states living in peace and side by side. This is the same position of the state of Senegal that Ambassador Colisek reaffirmed this morning. We are all well aware of this position. Today, the greatest support provided to Israel comes from the United States. So when a state decides to join the Hague group, that requires a lot of courage. If you see the number of states that make up that Hague group, they have one thing in common, and that is that they are not particularly favored by the current US administration. So we should applaud Senegal's courage of joining that group, and above all, to actively and vigorously defend Israel's respect, call for Israel to respect United Nations resolutions and the United Nations Charter, which continues to be violated. The most recent example of that is the preemptive or preventive bombing against Iran, but also repeated violations of international humanitarian law and international law, full stop. So these protests have taken place in Senegal. They were often authorized. Often the authorities themselves participated in those protests. And I would remind you that the Prime Minister participated in the first protest at the Great Mosque in Dakar, representing the country in person. We saw some 20 members of parliament from the ruling party and the opposition who marked several kilometers with civil society in that protest to support the Palestinian cause, and above all to denounce the genocide that is currently taking place, which continues in Gaza. It must be said that these protests, this advocacy is continuing. It's not going to stop until the genocide in Gaza ends and until the Palestinians have restored their inalienable rights, which currently, of course, are being violated. The territory granted to them in 1947 in the partition plan is now apportioned up, cut up, because since then Israel, through conquest and settlement building, has taken some of that territory. So this activity is ongoing. It will not stop. Africa fought against apartheid, colonialism, and won. Civil society in Africa cannot accept our people being colonized and another person being subjected to the apartheid regime that we diplomatic relations between African states and Israel. That position is gaining more and more traction. One of the advocates of that is Pierre Sané, that many of you know, the former Secretary General of Amnesty, who runs the Imagine Africa NGO or think tank, and he has openly at a significant meeting of heads of Amnesty for the entire African and Middle East continent, he called for this and called upon the organization to commit so that not only African states could break off their relations with Israel, but also for us to be able to drive forward this campaign to break off relations between African states and Israel, and also for Israel to be kicked out of the United Nations, because a state that does not respect the United Nations Charter and does not respect United Nations resolutions, that repeatedly and constantly violates those resolutions, that state no longer belongs in the United Nations. So that is a position that he advocates for strongly, and we are in discussions at the moment to see to what extent civil society across the continent would be able to support that position. There is also the question of Israel's participation in the future Youth Olympic Games in Dakar. Israel is a member of the OIC. They're probably going to come to Dakar with their athletes. Is it a country that is currently practicing genocide? Is that country going to be allowed to come and participate in the Olympic Games? We've seen countries like France and the United States excluding the Soviet Union from the Olympic Games in the past because the USSR had invaded Afghanistan. And so the USSR was barred from the Olympic Games. Now, is a state that is engaging in genocide now, that is not only called out by civil society, but also Francesca Albanese, a special rapporteur of the United Nations, the authorized voice of the United Nations on the rights of the Palestinian people. She has said that there is a genocide in Palestine. International lawyers agree today that what is happening in Palestine is a genocide. And all states under the United Nations Charter have an obligation to intervene in that case. If a genocide is taking place anywhere, under Chapter 7 of the Charter, all states are supposed to intervene. Unfortunately, today, you have major powers that deny that genocide and say that they will not stop, they would not arrest, Netanyahu, who has an arrest warrant out for him by the ICC if he were to set foot on their soil. So the situation we have now is that if Israel is not excluded from the Youth Olympic Games, the public would boycott, would be called upon to boycott all of the events in which Israel would participate, whether it be as a team or in solo events. The public would simply leave the room and the stadium. I think that is the bare minimum that we can ask Senegalese people to do if Israel indeed does come to those Youth Olympic Games, and if indeed
and elsewhere in West. We will now listen to our last, but certainly not least, Solidarity Network, Johannesburg. She will brief about this Solidarity Network and its actions for Palestine. Ms. Warner is a South African journalist, novelist, and editor. Since 2006, when she published her first book, her novels have been shortlisted for awards, including the South African Literary Awards and the Commonwealth Writers' Prize. A prolific journalist, essayist, and short story writer, she has been a contributor to a wide range of newspapers and magazines. In November 2023, Warner released a collection of essays entitled Vignettes of a People in an Apartheid State, reflecting what she witnessed in Palestine, which she had visited in May 2023 for the Palestine Festival of Literature. It is a pleasure and honor to have you, Ms. Warner. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you to the people of Senegal and the government of Senegal for being part of the Hague Group. And thank you, sir, to your government, which is part of the Hague Group. A very brave stance to take in a world where some superpowers are really showing their muscles. I would like to start by reading a little something. We arrive at the home of 25-year-old twins and activists Mohammed and Muna El-Kurd. Mohammed, a writer and a poet, is on hand to give us a background of their home, neighbors, a small tour of the neighborhood, and the protests that have made Sheikh Jarrah famous. After the Nakba of 1948, the El-Kurds and other Palestinians became refugees in Jerusalem because their land had been taken by Israeli settlers. The United Nations built homes for these refugees in the 1960s, giving them 3 years to pay for their homes and get title deeds. They and their Palestinian neighbors did just that. But East Jerusalem has become prime real estate, with many embassies and international organizations locating there. Zionists have thus decided they want this land. To this end, settlers have moved into Palestinian homes, arriving with guns and then settling in, most often with protection from Israeli government institutions, the Israeli police, and government-funded private security. I start by reading this excerpt because a lot has been said about the two-state solution today. As per Oslo Accord, it doesn't seem to be a thing from my experience when I was in Palestine, since Israel continues to flout the rules with no consequences. But additionally, during apartheid in South Africa, Bantustans were not considered independent. And to be fair, Palestine feels very much like it's a Bantustan, since you cannot go through Palestine without permission from Israel. Palestine was not for the British to give, just as Senegal was never for the French to give. If Bantustans were considered dysfunctional in apartheid South Africa, I fail to understand why they are acceptable for Palestinians. What then are the actions that we should take as Pan-Africanists, as people of the world? Firstly, I think we must push our governments to uphold the Geneva Convention. No one who has been part of committing a genocide should be allowed or not go without being charged. South Africa, where I come from, has had quite a few people who are Zionists who have taken part in the Israeli occupation forces, and yet nobody has been prosecuted. Despite the fact that South Africa is part of the Hague Group, and despite the fact that South Africa has taken the IOF to, has taken the Israeli government to the ICJ, I think this needs to be changed. I think it's very important for all of us, as part of boycotting and divesting and sanctioning, to disengage not just with Israel, but Israel's proxy governments. I'm talking about the US, I'm talking about the UK, I'm talking about France, I'm talking about Germany. I think as long as we are the 99% who still have our minerals that they need, our raw materials, we actually have that power, but we choose not to use it. The question shouldn't be, it goes further then as we're talking about this, where we start questioning the whole idea of who has the right to speak and who has the right for people to have certain things. If we were saying Iran shouldn't have uranium enrichment and we're telling them to dismantle, why are the people who are telling us that, the people who have been guilty for 400 years of genocide across the world? Why is this okay for us as 99% of the world? In understanding this, we must understand that in speaking up for the Palestinian people, we're fighting not just for the Palestinians, but the survival of humanity in itself. We're saying no to 99% of us being slaves and held hostage by 1% who make up the military-industrial complex. Our governments need to start questioning themselves. We need to start questioning our governments, particularly when certain actions are undertaken on our behalf and on our behest by political leaders who seem just to be colonial clerks for the empire. On a personal level, because sometimes the government can't do it all, there are also things that we can do. Let's also push not just the disengagement, let's also push the deregistration of companies in trade with Israel. Let's ask our governments to shut down embassies. No sports with Israel. We have to kick out Israel out of FIFA. We can't have sports with a nation that doesn't behave in a sportsmanlike manner. That's absolutely insane. Today is the 20th anniversary of BDS. So let's continue to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. And this is in particular to academics and artists. To people in civil society, it doesn't make sense for you to go to conferences in countries like the UK and the US and Germany that are objecting to people even wearing a t-shirt saying Free Palestine. What are you going to do there? What are you trying to justify in such countries? Let's also, as we do our advocacy for Palestine, advocate for the right of return of every Palestinian refugee from 1948. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Warner, for that very compelling presentation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are now ready to start our discussion. we need to end our session by 4 o'clock. So in the interest of time, I will open the floors to as many comments and questions as possible. And at the end, I will invite the speakers to again to address all the views that have been raised and also to make their concluding remarks. So please introduce yourselves at the beginning and make your interventions as brief as possible. Please, yes, question from the floor. Gentleman over there. Yes.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is Askari, Ambassador of Islamic Republic of Iran. I would like to thank the Honorable Chairperson for giving the floor to time, the esteemed Ambassador of Palestine to the United Nations, and the OIC representative and all panelists, and especially Senegal for this good initiative and support of Palestine by this conference. This conference can certainly be a step toward realizing the right to self-determination and the restoration of the rights of Palestine. I don't believe anyone doubt Iran's full and unwavering support for Palestine and its people. We strongly continue our support to Palestine. The genocidal Israel regime has committed all kinds of crimes for over 76 years. It has crossed every red line, from genocide, aggression, apartheid, and the killing of innocent civilians by more than 70,000, including journalists, UN personnel, and all other to accompany the destruction of infrastructure. When I saw the crying of dear Ambassador of Palestine in UN session, Security Council of United Nations, I also cried and regret from countries still who support the apartheid regime. On the lunch table today, we talked with our colleagues that we had a lunch and we supposed to bring us some more desserts. And you imagine just only what's happening in the Palestine and Gaza. If the international community stops this regime's aggression and occupation in Palestine, it would never have dared to attack Lebanon, Syria, and more recently, Iran. I agree with my fellow panelists in the first panel that the UN Security Council is incapable of action because it is dominated by Western powers who support this regime. 200 resolutions has passed by the Security Council of United Nations, of which 188 have condemned the actions of the apartheid regime, yet no concrete steps have been taken against this regime. Dear friend, the recent attack by this criminal regime, which possessed nuclear weapons against Iran, a member of United Nations and country without any nuclear programs or nuclear arms, was a blatant violation of all international laws and norms. International laws, I have to say, has collapsed. The aggressive Israeli regime only understands the language of power and force. Iran's legitimate and decisive act of self-defense carried out in accordance with the Article 51 of the United Nations Charter compelled it to request a ceasefire by Iran. I thank all countries condemn Israeli aggression Iran and support us, especially government of Senegal. Iran strongly support the establishment of the ceasefire, the end of apartheid regime atrocities, respect for human rights, access to humanitarian aid, and the creation of independent Palestinian state based on the will of all indigenous people of the Palestine. The last point, my suggestion is that, Mr. Chairman, the unity of all Islamic countries, not only Islamic countries, and all freedom-loving nations, along with comprehensive sanctions and boycott against this criminal regime, and the support of global public opinion, can, despite the backing of major powers, halt this regime and liberate Palestine from occupation, aggression, and oppression. I thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ambassador. Yes. pink tie, please. Yes.
Please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like, in the beginning, to thank Senegal government and people. Ladies and gentlemen, I am from League of Arab States, Director of Palestine Affairs, Dr. Haidar al-Jubouri. We stand before you today to shed light on one of the most painful and enduring issues in modern history, an issue that continues to afflict an entire people who for decades have suffered from persecution and forced displacement aimed at uprooting them from their land, particularly in the city of East Jerusalem, under the shadow of wars and repeated assaults by the Israeli occupation. East Jerusalem is currently facing a fierce onslaught on that does not merely target its stone and trees, but its very identity, history, and people. The residents of Jerusalem are subjected to systematic policies intended to empty the city of its indigenous population through forced displacement, revocation of residency rights, demolition of homes, constructions of settlements, and attempts to alter the city's demographic, religious, and cultural character. The ongoing war against the Palestinian people, particularly the atrocities occurring in the Gaza, is not longer a mere political conflict. It has become a flagrant humanitarian crime marked by harshest form of oppression, including siege, deprivation of basic rights, and failure by the international community to fulfill responsibilities. This is further compounded by the repeated incursions into Al-Aqsa Mosque and continuous violations of the sanctity of holy sites. The international community, represented by the United Nations, has issued dozens of resolutions affirming the illegality of the Israeli occupation of East Jerusalem and condemning all attempts to alter its legal or demographic status. Among the most notable of these Security Council resolutions, 242 of 1967, which calls for Israeli withdrawal from the territories it occupied, including Jerusalem, and Resolution 478 of 1980, which rejects the Israeli decision to annex Jerusalem and call on states not to move their embassies there, reaffirming that East Jerusalem is occupied Palestinian territory. Also, the League of Arab States has repeatedly affirmed in its resolutions that East Jerusalem is the eternal capital of the state of Palestine, unequivocally rejected all Israeli policies and measures aimed at Judaizing the city or erasing its Arab and Islamic identity. The League has also called for supporting the steadfastness of Jerusalem's residents and activities mechanism of international protection for them. Ladies and gentlemen, what is happening in the East Jerusalem is a direct threat to all those who believe in freedom, dignity, and justice. The silence of the world and the complicity of some parties that support Israel only increases our responsibility as free peoples to defend the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, including their right to establish an independent state along the June 4, 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital. We must stand for this right through all possible means in the media, in the politics, and in diplomacy. We must teach our children that East Jerusalem is not just a city. It is a belief, a history, and trust placed upon our shoulders. We must pray for its people, keep their cause alive in our heart and mind, and be their voice in every platform and every field. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, please, behind. Gentlemen.
Merci,
Yes.
Monsieur le Président. Je suis Madjei Mbouch de la coalition sénégalaise pour la cause palestinienne. Cette coalition regroupe différentes entités, notamment des mouvements citoyens, des partis politiques, des syndicats, des associations religieuses, des personnalités, en un mot, l'ensemble des composantes de la société civile sénégalaise. Nous avons estimé que justement pour être forts, nous devrions nous unir dans un seul cadre unitaire qui pourrait porter plus efficacement, justement, la solidarité avec la cause palestinienne. C'est pourquoi un des points qui nous semble important dans des rencontres de ce genre, c'est justement de porter cet appel à l'unité des différentes composantes du mouvement de solidarité, au plan national comme au plan sous-régional et continental. Gassama a rappelé tout à l'heure un certain nombre d'actions et d'activités et d'initiatives que nous avons prises même au niveau continental, je ne reviens pas. C'est plusieurs générations qui se retrouvent dans ce cadre-là. Il y en a qui militent depuis plusieurs décennies, il y en a des étudiants qui sont encore à l'université, mais tout ça, ça montre qu'il y a une vitalité et une relève qui est assurée aussi pour continuer le mouvement de solidarité vis-à-vis de la Palestine. Mais je pense que aussi bien société civile que État, nous devons faire plus. Nous devons faire plus pour la Palestine. En particulier, nous avons l'habitude de dire que nous, Sénégal, nous devons faire plus que tout autre pays dans le monde. Pourquoi? Ne serait-ce que parce que le Sénégal est le seul pays au monde à présider depuis 1975, c'est-à-dire depuis 50 ans, le Comité des Nations Unies pour l'exercice des droits inaliénables du peuple palestinien. Ne serait-ce qu'à ce titre, nous devons faire plus que tout autre pays. Et pour cela, nous devons effectivement saluer ce qui a été fait depuis des années, réaffirmé récemment par le président Bassirou Diomaye Faye, le Premier ministre Ousmane Sonko. Tout à l'heure, nous avons entendu le discours ferme et précis du ministre de l'Intérieur qui parlait au nom de ses collègues de l'affaires étrangères ainsi que du président et du Premier ministre. Mais nous pensons encore une fois que dans le prolongement de l'initiative de la haie, le Sénégal doit pouvoir prendre des initiatives pour voir au niveau de la sous-région, au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, que ce soit dans l'espace CEDEAO, mais même plus largement au niveau de l'Union africaine, et peut-être même de l'OCI, comme on l'a fait il y a 2 ans, l'année dernière en Gambie, comment faire en sorte que la voix du Sénégal puisse être une voix qui va rallier les autres à cette cause-là, pouvoir entraîner d'autres États à agir ensemble sur la base d'initiatives communes, parce que cela aura plus de portée, que ce soit le seul Sénégal ou en tout cas quelques pays. Je pense que l'initiative de la haie est aujourd'hui en train de s'élargir et ça doit être peut-être pour moi un support qui peut permettre au Sénégal de prendre des initiatives de déploiement dans l'espace régional et continental africain. Il est évident que si nous le faisons, nous pouvons avoir de l'influence et jouer plus activement notre rôle de leader dans l'espace africain. Mais les sociétés civiles aussi doivent faire davantage. Je ne reviens pas sur l'ensemble des rappels faits par Gassama, qui joue un rôle important dans notre mouvement de solidarité avec la Palestine, et en particulier insister sur les géologies de 2026. Les Jeux olympiques de la jeunesse qui vont avoir lieu l'année prochaine à Dakar. Nous sommes en train de voir comment initier une pétition pour pouvoir porter vraiment l'initiative de boycott d'Israël, interdire, en tout cas demander à nos autorités étatiques de ne pas inviter Israël, de ne pas permettre que les Israéliens participent à cette activité-là, parce que c'est le sport, mais c'est l'universel. Le sport, c'est la culture de la paix. Israël, c'est tout le contraire de la paix. Aujourd'hui, Israël, même si on fait une conférence, une solution à 2 États, au moment où Israël est en train de dire il n'y aura jamais d'État palestinien. Il le dit fort, il l'assume. Donc nous devons effectivement faire ce type de conférence, mais l'accompagner d'actions dissuasives, d'actions qui permettent de mettre la pression sur cet État-là, de sorte qu'ils se disent « Ah, attention, je ne peux pas franchir le Rubicon ». Actuellement, ils sont en train de franchir le Rubicon. Parce qu'au-delà du génocide, leur projet, c'est l'effacement total de
Palestinian identity, raise it from the historic lands of the Palestinian people. So, as a state, we need to strengthen our actions to help Palestine be more present on the ground. And if we pool our efforts, we can achieve results and impose a situation like the one we managed to achieve in the fight against apartheid in South Africa. I think that's a good example. We can do this here because Israel needs to understand that their policy is not okay and it's not going to work. Thank you.
Next, I invite Ambassador of South Africa, please. Madam.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, and thank you so much for giving me the floor. And good afternoon to everyone in the room. Dr. Mandela, in his book, Long Walk to Freedom, he talks about climbing a hill only to find that there are more hills to climb. The more you climb, the more hills you get. And listening from the testimonies from Palestine in the morning, I couldn't help but to think of that phrase from his book. And I wanted to say to all the Palestinians here and out there, this is a very long walk. And all I can say is that the struggle continues, basically. And we thank the government of Senegal for providing us this platform. And we assure them of our support and availability in this cause. Ours is a message of solidarity with the Palestinian people. Chairperson, South Africa condemns the illegal acts by Israel as the occupying power and calls for accountability for all the atrocities, the ongoing genocide, violation of human rights, and war crimes committed against the Palestinian people. Israel's continued impunity for its actions, which show blatant disregard for international law, undermines the credibility of the international system and international law, particularly given the grave nature of the violations being committed. The obligation to prevent and punish the crime of genocide is an obligation that is owed to the international community as a whole, and was primary motivator for South Africa's decision to take this case to the International Court of Justice. We must be decisive in our resolve to hold those responsible for the violations of international law, including international humanitarian law and human rights law, without exception. We call for full and unhindered access for humanitarian aid, which is desperately needed, and the implementation of the provisional measures granted by the International Court of Justice, as well as resolutions adopted by the United Nations and the Security Council and General Assembly. Failure to implement resolutions and decisions emanating from these organs of the United Nations, which are indispensable in safeguarding the very existence of the Palestinian people, undermines the purposes of the principles of the UN Charter. South Africa will not tire in its support for the Palestinian quest for self-determination and an independent state existing side by side with the State of Israel along the 1967 borders. We stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people and remain committed in their just cause. We have a responsibility to act as the international community. South Africa will continue efforts aimed at realizing a Palestinian state which will enjoy equality among all other nations of the world. We thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. We only have time for a few more questions before we can give back the floor to our speakers. Next, Excellency, you want to, please go ahead.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je suis l'ambassadeur de la République tunisienne à Dakar.
In Dakar, Tunisia. I'd like to express my thanks to the Senegalese authorities and to all of the organisers for the efforts made and the means made available in order to make the holding of this conference a success. Our meeting today is taking place at a critical juncture, marked by the intensification of the occupying unit and their genocidal war and their policies of oppression and embargo imposed against the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. These Zionist practices without any type of accountability, with worrying silence from the international community, that constitutes a flagrant violation of all international conventions and of the most fundamental moral and human values. Tunisia, while paying tribute to the heroic resistance of the brother Palestinian people, has always called upon humanity and the international community to make an effort to assume their duty to protect the Palestinian people. Tunisia reaffirms its support to all initiatives that seek to deliver a just, all-encompassing settlement to the Palestinian cause, to enable the Palestinian people to recover their inalienable, imprescriptible rights, including self-determination and the establishment of an independent state. Thank you very much, Chairman.
We have a few more requests. I would like to request for those who want to take the floor to be very brief. Ambassador of Indonesia, then we have the lady in white. Ambassador of Colombia, yes. All right. Please, Excellency first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Distinguished Excellencies, my name is Ardian Wicaksono, the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Senegal. Let me begin by thanking the government of Senegal for its warm hospitality and the OIC for co-organizing this important conference with the committee. I thank the briefers for the valuable insights. Indeed, implementation and concrete action are the key to addressing the urgent situation on the ground in Jerusalem and across the occupied Palestinian territory. And in this regard, upholding international law is crucial. Indonesia's views that the advisory opinion of the ICJ of the 19 July 2024 is a good point of departure to determine states' obligations and avenue for actions. The opinion reaffirms what has long been known, that Israel's occupation is illegal, and that third states bear specific responsibilities not to recognize, aid, or abet the continuation of this unlawful situation. In response, Indonesia submitted a formal contribution to the Secretary General's report A/79/588, dated 19 December 2024. Our submissions outline 5 priority objectives for action by states. First, securing full and unconditional recognition of the States of Palestine as a legal obligation arising from the right to self-determination and the duty of non-recognition of unlawful territorial acquisition. Second, safeguarding the viability of the two-state solution by halting settlement expansion, ending de facto annexation, and upholding the territorial integrity of Palestine, including East Jerusalem. Third, in view of the ongoing crisis in Gaza, secure the immediate implementation of a ceasefire. Fourth, depending on the role of the United Nations and its agencies, particularly by protecting UNRWA from politicized attacks and ensuring sustainable support for its mandate. Fifth, ensuring accountability for the atrocity crimes by advancing proceedings before the ICC, promoting an universal jurisdiction, and encouraging states to adopt national accountability measures. Indonesia will continue to support all diplomatic efforts, including through its role in the CEIRPP Bureau, its membership in the OIC, non-aligned movement, and other relevant groupings, to ensure that law is not only respected in words, but upheld through the concrete action. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Madame, please.
Merci beaucoup. Et je suis Claudia Mosquera,
Thank you. I'm
l'ambassadeur.
Claudia Mosquera, the ambassador of Colombia. When the ambassador of Algeria talked about concerning silence from the international community, Tunisia, the fact is, when there is silence, there is also a voice from the global south, represented in our case by President Gustavo Petro, who very quickly spoke out about what's happening in Gaza. He is the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, and he represents a progressive project that includes the values of life and all of the harm caused by war and genocide and destruction. So that's why Colombia is very active on the issue of Palestine. The government and people of Colombia are very concerned about everything that's happening there. Politically speaking, we have appointed an ambassador who will soon be in Ramallah, and that's a way of showing our commitment to the Palestinian people. Similarly, on the 31st of January this year, with Belize, Bolivia, and Cuba, Honduras, Malaysia, Namibia, Senegal, and South Africa, we set up the Hague Group. As you know, this is a group that's dynamic, that has made concrete proposals. This morning, civil society talked about concrete actions. What are we going to do? Basically, someone from civil society talked about how important it is to set up a charter. Now, the Hague Group currently is saying two things. One, we need to prevent arms transfer, arms that might harm the civilian populations, and also the transfer of fuel by sea. We need to stop these ships from arriving in the ports they're going to. We have also called a meeting. Ambassador Ira, the ambassador rather, will be going to Bogota very soon in July. We're looking forward to hosting you there. And our hope is to adopt new measures for humanity so that we can stop this suffering and improve this situation. Thank you very much.
Please. Could I, behind you, I think he's been putting his hand up. Yeah, sorry. Please be brief.
Je m'appelle Savimi Tao.
I'm Savimi Dao of the Embassy of Angola here in Dakar. Excellencies, Special Representative of the Secretary General, colleagues from the United Nations Office for West Africa and the Sahel, Mr. Ambassador Koli Sek, Chair of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, distinguished representatives of the Organisation for Islamic Cooperation, distinguished representative of the State of Palestine, Your Excellency Mr. Mansour Riyad, distinguished delegates. At the outset, please allow me to extend my congratulations to the State of Senegal, to the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, and to the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, for organising this very important high-level international conference on Jerusalem. Chairman, every day we bear witness to a tragic situation on the Gaza Strip, and this is something that should lead us to think about our responsibility as the United Nations vis-à-vis the grave consequences of this conflict for future generations, and also to think about our duty to preserve international peace and security. The Republic of Angola condemns all measures that hinder the arrival of the humanitarian aid required and that compromise fundamental rights like the right to life, health, food, drinking water and sanitation, thus aggravating tensions in the region. Chairman, the Republic of Angola reiterates the need to find the best ways to deliver a lasting peace in Gaza based on the respect of the United Nations Charter and relevant resolutions of the General Assembly and the Security Council. Chairman, to conclude, we believe that the two-state solution is the only viable option to put an end to the Israel-Palestine conflict. This is the basis, the bedrock of the existence of an Israeli and Palestinian state living together side by side in peace and harmony. Thank you.
I think I can have one more. Do you want to speak before we, yeah. Okay, please, please be brief.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Abdelghani Naim. I am the ambassador of Sudan. I will be very brief. I would like to express our thanks and appreciation for the government and the people and civil society of Senegal for their great support for the Palestinian case, which is continued for a very long time, and we are really very thankful for what they are doing on behalf of all of us. And thankful the chair and the panelists. I think I agree completely with what Ms. Warner has told us, that the question of Palestine is not only about Palestine, but it's also about the survival of humanity. There is no peace in the world without peace in the Middle East. That we should, I think, all of us keep in mind. In 1885, Berlin Conference was held and Africa was divided. In 1916, Sykes-Picot was also organized and the Arab world is divided. There is no room not to think of history repeating itself, especially when we are seeing now war in Europe. That is a very serious issue for all of us. I think if we would like to prove we can be humanly conscious of what is going to happen to us, we need to find a solution for Palestine. Also, concretely, what Madame Fatima Sheikh has said, that we need to support the Palestinians on the ground. As far as health, education, we speak about numbers of people being killed or injured or even under the rebels up to now. So we should think of concrete means of how we are going to help the farmers, the people who may need help to have operations or whatever sort of concrete assistance. That's what's going to help the people more, maybe even our important statements. We spoke about UNRWA being stopped from its work. So I didn't see any or have not heard anything about what are we going to do specifically to the refugees. So these are, I think we need just to express our thanks for what we have heard here today. And as Mandela said, it's a long way to walk, but we need to accelerate the process. It is a benefit of everyone. It's a benefit of humanity. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. Thank you for all the views. Apologies for not being able to take more views, but I really need to bring in our speakers back so that they can respond to the comments from the floor and also make concluding remarks. 1 minute. Okay, go ahead.
Je tiens à vous remercier infiniment de m'avoir donné la dernière minute à moi-même. Je me présente, je suis Mohamed Khalaf, le chargé d'affaires de l'ambassade d'Irak à Dakar.
Of the Iraqi embassy in Dakar. First of all, I would like to very much thank you and thank all the participants, the Senegal, the host country, and I'd like to ask 2 questions, and of course I hope they will be answered. How many generations have come into the world and left the world hoping that the genocide carried out since 1948 until the present day that we see each and every day, until 2025, seeing this genocide that has not ended? How many people have come into the world and left the world while that has been happening? How many people does that need to happen to for Israel to end its genocide, for a Palestinian people that only wants its right, the right to exist and live with dignity and prosperity on their lands that were forcibly taken from them? I've also been wondering, we're also talking about the chosen people. Perhaps the chosen people was in the Old Testament, but in the 21st century, who is the chosen people? Is it Israel that is the chosen people, or is it the country that is itself defending its lands? It's Palestine that has been chosen to defend it. That's what I wanted to say, because the Iraqi people refuse completely any indignity. We stand firmly with the Palestinian people, and we will always be so, because they are defending a righteous cause. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to bring back Mr. Hamzawi. He's online. Please, maybe you want to respond to some of the comments and also give your concluding remarks, please.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, and thank you so much to the Excellencies and dear colleagues and friends on the panel and in the whole for very useful and valuable comments. I'm going to be extremely short. I just would like to highlight 2 points. I believe, once again, focusing on the OIC, and the same analysis extends, I believe, to the League of Arab States, that it is, from a diplomatic perspective, beneficial to the OIC as well as to the League of Arab States to have a plurality of positions vis-a-vis diplomatic relations and the level of diplomatic relations. Some of the countries at the OIC as well as in the League of Arab States do have with the State of Israel as of now. I would like to remind everyone that at the height of the Cold War between the former Soviet Union and the
de la guerre froide
existed between the 2 superpowers. It's always good to have, to my mind, to have a diplomatic connection. It's always good to try to use it for mediation, similar to what my home country, Egypt, has been doing since October of 2023, similar to what the state of Qatar has been doing, and several other countries within the League of Arab States and the OIC. Diplomacy continues to be, to my mind, the only way forward as long as we're interested in conflict resolution and conflict prevention, and not in wholesale negation of the right of existence of any one of the 2 conflict parties. We are advocating for a 2-state solution. We are, to my mind, advocating for the Arab Peace Initiative, which is a cornerstone and was a piecemeal and continues to be a piecemeal for diplomacy around the Palestinian issue. And as long as we're advocating for that, diplomacy is much needed, and in fact we need more. The second point is multilateral diplomacy is key to all efforts. I am personally, as an academic expert, I am and have never been, and with all due respect to my fellow panelists, I have never been a big supporter of boycott measures, even in dire situations, because people-to-people interactions are always beneficial. And I believe clear differentiation between actions and policies of governments and actions and policies of and preferences of people with regard to Israel is needed, and that we need to consider the value of people-to-people engagement in the sense of creating consensus for Palestinian rights to finally transcend apartheid, to finally transcend illegal settlement activities, threats of displacement, individual in East Jerusalem or family-based in East Jerusalem, or the threat of mass displacement in Gaza. All of this comes back to transcending the practices which we have been suffering from in the region since 1948 and establishing a peaceful present and future. I thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Mr. Hamzawi. Thank you. Next, Mr. Kosama, please, your concluding thoughts.
Donc, je vais essayer d'aller le plus vite possible en rappelant d'abord une anecdote pour dire que l'État d'Israël a un objectif bien précis.
The state of Israel has a very clear objective, which all of the states of the world are aware of, and which unfortunately they're not fully taking on board. In 2005, here in Dakar, I met the ambassador of Israel, who was here, an extremist who was subsequently recalled to capital and given an important office. He spoke about the situation in the occupied territory and the return of refugees. And when the subject of the return of refugees came up, he said, listen, we're going to take all of those lands, we're going to take the West Bank, we're going to take the Gaza Strip. The Palestinians have a country, and it's called Jordan and the other Arab countries. We will never allow a Palestinian state to be born on that territory. So when we see the prevailing situation today with this plan for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza, with the deportation of the entire population of Gaza to create a marina for American billionaires, and perhaps billionaires from other countries are going to come and spend their holidays, one cannot help remembering that conversation with the ambassador of Israel, who said, we're all going to deport them. They have a country, it's called Jordan and other Arab countries, but we're never going to allow them to have land here. This country was given to us by God in the Old Testament, and it belongs to us. So states that support the Palestinian cause, therefore, need to redouble their efforts. We were informed by the director of the International Network a few weeks ago that the president of Senegal in person decided to go to New York to that conference of the two-state solution. We were pleased to hear that, and also that other states wanted to go, and I think that heads of state should go to that conference en masse. Because I think that that conference that was planned for on the 19th, there were only a handful of heads of state going to the conference. It was essentially permanent representatives in New York who were going to go. So I think it's important that all of the states that support the Palestinian cause and that want a two-state solution be represented at the highest possible level. If it's not the President of the Republic going to New York, then it should at least be a foreign minister who goes to New York for that. I think that would send a very strong message that needs to be conveyed to states that support Palestine. And the other issue is the question of the boycott. It is up to us, as the citizens of the world, to decide to boycott Israel. I mentioned the actions that we've taken in Senegal with the withdrawal of a product from a supermarket. Those actions may be small, but when reproduced at a global scale by all of the citizens of the world, they can have an impact. Let's not forget that in the case of South Africa, it was a global boycott of South African products and of companies that invested in South Africa that led to a withdrawal of investment and companies from that country, and ultimately led to the weakening of the economy and the collapse of apartheid. So the boycott, yes, unions also need to be mobilized in this struggle. Unions are often left out, but we saw the role that they recently played in Marseille and other French ports to prevent arms being loaded loaded on ships to go to Israel. That was also the case a few years ago in South Africa, where workers also prevented a ship that was transiting with arms. They prevented it from using South African ports. So we also need to mobilize unions in this struggle. Thus far, we have left unions out of this mobilization. And so it is also up to us, citizens, to act, and to act decisively by boycotting not only Israel, but also by boycotting companies that invest in the occupied territory and that are encouraging colonization and settlement building. We need to encourage those companies to leave the country, leave the territory, and to ensure that all of those Jews that are leaving Brooklyn and Ukraine and going to Israel to kill Palestinians, to make sure that they do not have an interest to return to Palestine and the OPT.
Mr. Gassama, of course, we have our Ms. Warner to have the final word, please.
Thank you very much. The charge d'affaires from Iraq asked a question, and I think it's very important that so many of you ambassadors are here. Perhaps you can please pass on the message to your governments that one of the things that are most important that could probably change the game for everybody is a reform of the UN. Nothing is going to change if one country can decide to vote against the rest of the countries in the UN. Today, of course, is 641 days since October 7. And I just want to conclude by saying it did not start on October 7, 2023, because we know of the revolt of 1963 to 1939, where Zionists killed Palestinians with the aid of the British. We know of the Nakba of 1948. We know of the Six-Day War in 1967. We know of the 1982 siege of Beirut. We know of the massacres of Sabra and Shatila. We know the Zionist state has imprisoned men, women, and children without charge. We know, too, that those who support the Zionist state with weapons and funding and their proxies are responsible for the killings of Lumumba in the Congo, the overthrow of Django and trumped-up charges against Lula in Brazil, the death of Allende in Chile, the killings of Sankara in Burkina Faso, the overthrow of Aristide in Haiti, the killings of Gaddafi in Libya, the killings of Haniyeh in Iran, the killing of Nasrallah in Lebanon. For the coup d'etats of any progressive leader in the global south who puts the interests of the majority of the economically less well-off who form the majority of their citizens at the expense of external investors. Read capitalism. We know the Zionists and their proxies are responsible for the killing of many in the Congo, in Sudan, in Lebanon, in Haiti, in Myanmar, in Somalia, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, all over the world. And they do this to maximize profits, so they need the wars. We saw during the 30th memorial of the Rwandan genocide an African president inviting the president of the Zionist states, as this same state genocided and continues to genocide Palestinians. And we know the bones of the men, women, and children who were genocided in Rwanda rattled at this disrespect. I reiterate then, a free Palestine frees us all. So let's please add our voices in unison and continue pushing in all our different ways to our governments, but even in our personal lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Warner, for those very powerful and thought-provoking concluding remarks. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our deliberations of Plenary 2 on behalf of the Committee on the exercise of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people and the Organisation of Islamic Cooperation. I would like to express our deep appreciation to the distinguished speakers who shared their knowledge and experience. Many thanks also to all participants who contributed to the discussion and for your interest and attention. Now we will proceed with the, do you want to speak? Now we will proceed with the closing ceremony. That's what I've been said. Been mentioned, yeah? Okay, and I'd like to invite Ambassador Kolisa and Minister Riyad Mansour to come to the podium so that we can proceed with the closing ceremony. Thank you.
Excellencies, we will now proceed with the closing session of today's event. Welcome, Minister Riyad Mansour. On behalf of the Committee for the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, I would like to thank all of the participants for their vital contributions. In particular, I thank the government of the Republic of Senegal for having facilitated the organization of this event. The Dakar Conference on Jerusalem is coming to an end at a moment of severity, but also of hope. Severity because the fate of Jerusalem continues to embody the wounds of a long-standing, painful and unresolved conflict, but also hope because this meeting here in Dakar has given voice to a shared will, the will to put law, human dignity and peace back at the heart of the Palestinian question. Senegal has never wavered on those principles. For decades, our country has borne forth the Palestinian cause with permanence, loyalty and faith at the UN, the OIC, and today as well with the hosting of this conference. This is not a symbolic act, it is rather an act of faith. Faith in international law, faith in justice, and faith in peace. We know that Jerusalem cannot be monopolized by any nation. It cannot be the exclusive preserve of anyone. It is simultaneously a holy city, a shared memory, and a moral test for humanity. This conference happens at a time when the President of the Republic of Senegal and his Minister of Foreign Affairs are on an official visit to Washington. This demonstrates the consistency of our commitment to the Palestinian cause with clarity, whilst also maintaining a strategic dialogue with our partners. Senegal will continue to act not out of posturing, but rather out of conviction. We will remain a constant humanist, independent voice that refuses to remain silent in the face of injustice and which still deeply believes that peace is possible, provided that it is a just peace. I would like to pay tribute to the government of Senegal, my country, and as chair of the Committee on the Exercise of the Rights of the Palestinian People, I'd now like to give the floor to Minister Mansour for his concluding remarks. You have the floor, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also I want to thank you for your concluding remarks. And through you, we want first to express our appreciation for the tireless effort of the Committee on the exercise of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people, which led us to the convening, preparation, and the program of this very important conference on Jerusalem at the moment of the tragedy of Gaza and what the Palestinian people are going through. I just also want to express our gratitude to the government and people of Senegal. We are so grateful for the fact that the government collaborated with the United Nations and with the OIC for giving us the venue to have this important meeting at this very critical moment in the history of the struggle of the Palestinian people, to have this meeting here today. We have been here for less than 2 days, but we were able to have a very substantive meeting with the Foreign Minister of Senegal in the Foreign Ministry on the eve of her trip to Washington, D.C. It was a very constructive meeting. She assembled all of her senior staff to be with us in that meeting, in which we discussed the question of Palestine and the obligations and what we expect from countries to commit to, including Senegal, at this very particular moment. We were delighted also to have a very powerful meeting with almost the entire leadership of a very leading university, the #1 university in Senegal, in which we had a very deep discussion with them, with the deans of different faculties of the university, with the rector, and as I said before, that they offered to have a conference of universities from different departments, from as many universities are ready to convene here in Dakar on the question of Palestine. A creative idea, concrete idea, something that the university is committing to do. We have to consult with our universities in Palestine and all of the countries here who are ready and willing to consult with their universities to maybe make this idea as one of the products that emerged from this very important conference in Dakar. And we are honored that they put in the platform of that university, the media platform, the different platforms, that the university received warmly the ambassador of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, while the university kicked out the Israeli ambassador from that university a few days ago. Another concrete step, maybe symbolic, small, but this is the kind of thing, this is the era that we are entering. Not the reiterations of principles, but the commitment to action. Somebody might say that these are small steps. We take them as they come. Small, medium size, big, gigantic. Give it to us in any form or shape that you are ready to give it, but give us concrete steps, commitments, action. Do something. We need to put an end to this illegal occupation, and the days of independent Palestine should be looming on the horizon, and it should happen as soon as possible. We are grateful for the OIC, who collaborated with us, as they have been doing for the last 12 or more years, in convening this annual conference on Jerusalem. While we are consumed with Gaza, we will never forget Jerusalem. Jerusalem is the heart of the question of Palestine. It is the most important issue for us Palestinians. Without Jerusalem, it's like the body without the heart. It is the heart of the Palestinian people and the Palestine question. So the OIC, we are happy that we are resuming this annual conference, and your capitals, for the countries who are here, compete for inviting the next international conference in Jerusalem in your capital. We did it in some of your capitals, but we invite others who have not enjoyed having the conference in Jerusalem to take place in your countries. Of course, I want to thank the Division of Palestinian Rights. They are the individuals that you they are not displayed to speak. Often Matthews is sitting on the table, but more importantly than sitting on the table, all the things that they do behind the scenes to make this conference happen through collaboration with the Foreign Ministry of Senegal, with the Comité, with the OIC, with everyone, all the details to make sure that this conference is a successful one. We are grateful to them and we thank them for their efforts. Of course, this meeting, as I said, it comes at a very unique moment in the history of the Palestinian people. We went through Nakba, 1948, but we are going through genocide now because of what is really happening in Gaza, where this is something that is huge in our history and it is huge in the history of humanity. Nothing like this has taken place since World War II. We said in World War II, humanity, never again, but it is happening to the Palestinian people. It should not happen. It is happening. It is our collective responsibility to stop it from even taking a more sophisticated and complicated and tragic and painful levels if, God forbid, that 2 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to be kicked out of the Gaza Strip, forcefully displaced outside their country, to be followed by a similar action and policies for the Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. So it is our collective duty to stop it as is now, and we will never forget the 200,000 Palestinians who have been killed, injured under the rubble, especially the children, the most precious component of our society. In Gaza, out of the 2 million Palestinians, half of them, 1 million children. We do not want to deprive them of their futures, of their dreams, of their plans, of what they want to be. They are the future of Palestine, and it is our duty to save them from elimination, from implanting hatred in them forever. We need to save them from that tragedy. We need to give them hope. Ceasefire would give them hope. Rebuilding Gaza would give them hope. Providing them with schools gives them hope. Providing them with hospitals and clinics would give them hope. And providing them with food, with water, would give them hope. It is our collective duty to do whatever we can do in order to give them hope and to keep them alive and to allow them to attend to their wounds. And God willing, we will succeed in minimizing the damage that has been done to them so far as a result of this savagery by the Israeli occupying forces, especially in the Gaza Strip. Now, as you leave this conference, it's not that you came and listened to speeches. You have to take from it commitment and responsibilities. We are moving in the direction, perhaps in 24 hours or less or more, the new date for the international conference will be announced. I can assure you it will take place in this month, in July. But I am not at liberty to tell you the exact date. It is not my duty to do so. It is the two co-chairs who will announce the new date, Saudi Arabia and France. But we need now, hopefully we will succeed in having a ceasefire, to regenerate some kind of a momentum based on the essence of the concept paper that was circulated to all member states in preparation for that conference. The concept paper said that this is an action-oriented conference. It is not a normal conference. It is something new. You come to the conference with commitment of what you want to do in your national capacity to shorten the life of this illegal occupation, to end it, to allow for the independence of the Palestinian state, to allow for the end of occupation, to allow for giving the Palestinian people what belongs to them, freedom and dignity in their own independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital. So we need to be creative, not to come and to tell me that you are committing yourself to self-determination for the Palestinian people. That is granted to us in the Charter of the UN. We worked very hard to legislate resolutions to reaffirm our rights reflected in international law and the principles reflected in the Charter of the United Nations. We paid dearly for a long period of time to have these resolutions. They were not given to us as gifts by anyone. Everything that we do, we work very hard for it, and we suffer and give a bigger price by our people in the ground, whether in Gaza, in East Jerusalem, in occupied West Bank, the Palestinians inside Israel, the Palestinians in the refugee camps, the Palestinians everywhere, including those who study at Columbia University for expressing an opinion. They end up in jail with danger of being expelled because they are defending Palestinian rights and Palestinian ideas. So this conference, let us make it the turning point of moving from the theoretical to the practical, from reiterating principles to taking action. We need you to move in that direction. I know it is not easy because some might say, let us try to do it in a collective way. That's fine. But to do it in a collective way, you need few brave ones to open the door. Let the brave ones step to the plate and take the first practical steps so that they can pull others to follow them. It is taking us forever with one big country, extensive negotiation, to give the commitment that they will recognize the state of Palestine as an investment in peace and saving the two-state solution. Yet, we don't have it delivered yet. Although we are patient and we are working with them in order to accomplish that objective. But we need action, small, big action. And step by step, we will enter into this new stage where action will speak, not theory. We're not there yet. We are at the beginning. We're opening the door, beginning to open the door. And after that, we are going to enter the new era. And the new era would require more commitments, more steps, more things that need to be done. For those who are excited about this meeting in Colombia in a few days, which I will be going to it in a few days after I return back to New York, we worked so hard with our colleagues in The Hague to form this group. We worked very hard with South Africa and others to go to The Hague to ask for provisional measures to stop Israel from continuing to do in Gaza that is plausibly genocide. And we will let the ICJ, when they deal with the merit of that substance, make their determination, and we respect the determination. But the ICJ said that there is a possibility of genocide, therefore Israel, stop doing what you're doing. Send provisional assistance unhindered to the Palestinian people in Gaza so that they do not starve to death. And they asked them to do certain things 3 times, and Israel is refusing. So therefore, should we accept this as the new normal, or should we continue to push and be creative in order to see this Israeli occupying authority kneeling and being broken in front of the pressure, not only of the Palestinian people, but all of you, as we did when we defeated all of us, along with the people of South Africa, the abhorrent system of apartheid. This is the new mentality that we need. We will not vanish. We are resilient people. We need you. We need you to be with us. We need you to give 120% of your energy, each and every one of us. 100% is not sufficient. We need to see everyone elevated to the level of the sacrifice of the Palestinian people.
Consentir au même sacrifice que le peuple palestinien, être à la hauteur de ce sacrifice.
Will open the door first. Others will follow. This is how it was done by everyone else, and we are no exception. And we thank you for your efforts. You take this from this conference and make the commitment that you will do something more than normal for helping the Palestinian people. We deserve it, we need it, and we count on you to be with us. We are giving the ultimate price. We are giving our lives, and we are suffering, and we are in a situation of going through genocide. We did more than people can bear, but we need you to be with us and to do your share so that we can collectively, as humanity, succeed in allowing the Palestinian people to enjoy freedom and dignity. Mr. Chairman, with that I stop. We thank Senegal, we thank all of you, and la lucha continua. Thank you.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le ministre Mansour, pour votre discours toujours poignant. Je vais à présent donner la parole à son Excellence,
I now give the floor to Mr. Harshu, Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Senegal, to give the closing statement on behalf of the Republic of Senegal.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres,
Excellencies, Ministers,
honorables parlementaires,
distinguished
Monsieur le représentant du système des Nations Unies,
representatives
Mesdames
of the
et
UN
Messieurs les
system,
ambassadeurs, représentants et observateurs permanents,
representatives and permanent observers,
distingués dignitaires religieux,
distinguished religious
chers
dignitaries,
membres de la société civile,
members of civil society,
experts et chercheurs émérites,
distinguished
Mesdames et
researchers and
chers
academics,
invités.
dear guests, ladies and
Alors que
gentlemen.
la conférence de Dakar sur la question de Jérusalem prend fin,
Well, as this
permettez-moi
conference in
d'adresser
Dakar and Jerusalem is
au
coming
nom
to
du
its end,
gouvernement de
on
la
behalf
République
of
du
the
Sénégal,
government of the Republic of Senegal, please allow me to express my most heartfelt thanks and most sincere congratulations to all of the participants for their active mobilization and their unwavering commitment to make this event a success for the Palestinian cause, which is a just cause, it is a necessary cause. Particular mention goes to the committee, and I congratulate the chair of the committee for his able leadership of our work, and also the experts for the quality of their presentations, which shows their generosity and their undeniable commitment to the Palestinian cause. Through my voice, the government of the Republic of Senegal wishes to express its unreserved solidarity to the Palestinian people, in particular the people of the Gaza Strip, who have fallen victim to a brutal campaign of aggression, disregarding all provisions of international law. This is an extremely alarming spectacle of murder of Palestinian civilians, organized famine, the systematic destruction of essential infrastructure. All of this has been happening on a daily basis since October 7th, and we could even say since even before that. Ladies and gentlemen, the burden of the Palestinian people does not end there, though, because indeed the tragedy of the population of Gaza is echoed by their brothers in Jerusalem, which is the holy city of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. This is an area where the beliefs of the faithful of the different monotheistic religions come together, and therefore it's necessary to ensure that its Arab Islamic identity is not erased. At the same time, when it comes to the memory and the historic and cultural heritage of the city, we're seeing now a situation of apartheid, where a large part of the population is locked up in ghettos and kicked off their land due to their ethnic or religious belonging.
Negationist.
This negationist enterprise, we must recall, since 1948, has been operating outside of the framework of international law, which is the only benchmark that we have in order to govern relations between states. And this situation is something that compels us to uphold our common humanity and to act rapidly so that we can find effective solutions that will enable us to put an end to the Israeli policy of apartheid and the erasure of Palestinian memory. On this, the regrettable discourse must stop and give rise to concrete actions in order for us to put a lasting end to the actions and maneuvers that are taking place in these places in order to safeguard the status of this holy city. Our responsibility on this is, first of all, a moral one. Given the holy nature of the city and the principles of inclusion and the right of self-determination for the Palestinian people, lead us to believe in the need to preserve the historic, cultural, and demographic nature of Jerusalem. To emphasize some key ideas that came up during our discussions. In particular, the consolidation of the role of the committee, strengthening of UNRWA, and engaging in cooperation on the prevention of the transfer of arms and equipment to Tel Aviv, and engaging in international cooperation on this. These measures, far from being levied against one state, are part of our common commitment as an international community to simply ensure that the principles and rules of international law are respected. In this regard, Senegal launches an urgent appeal to the international community to seize on the recommendations that have come out of this conference today in order to enable us to preserve the holy status of the city of Jerusalem. Doing this will be delivering our commitment to peace and justice and the respect of international law. By way of conclusion, I would like to reaffirm solemnly and significantly Senegal's commitment to the Palestinian cause and our firm commitment to the work of the committee. It's also my pleasure to applaud the active and remarkable participation here of members of civil society, and I'd like to call them to ramp up their advocacy when it comes to public opinion. Your contributions will have a positive impact, I'm sure, on the conference on the question of Palestine that will be taking place in New York in the weeks to come. We have a lot of hope in that for broad recognition of a free and independent Palestinian state. I thank all of you, and I wish you a good journey home to your respective countries. On that, I close this conference. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much.
J'annonce qu'il y a une pause café à l'extérieur.